Welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast. We stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance. And we have a special guest in today. We have Jesse. He works for the sheriff's office, right? Sheriff's office for Knox County. And we're going to talk about FTP for the police, baby.
Yeah, of course. That's how we all know it.
We wanted to have someone that served the community and for the law enforcement. Matt and I, we both I hope you value this, Matt, or else I'm going to kick you out. I mean, we value police officers, emergency service people. They're amazing people, and they do amazing things for the community and keep us safe. And we're blessed with getting the opportunity to have several of them train here at the gym. And Jesse, you also won. What was that award you won as well? It was
Deputy of the Year.
Deputy of the Year, yes. Yeah, he won Deputy of the Year. That's super awesome. So I thought he'd be the perfect person to come in and talk to us a little bit about, just about law enforcement in general and just some other good stuff that they do for the community and why we should support the police. And, right, Matt, am I touching on the...
He was also in the Air Force.
In the Air Force, thank you for your service. I actually didn't know. I didn't know that.
7 years Air National Guard. So
awesome.
Right out of high school.
Yeah, thank you for your service, and then also husband, right, father.
Yep.
Or do you have kids?
I do. I have one.
That's
one
what I thought.
Boy.
Yeah, so I think a perfect person. We fit everything together, talking about faith, family, fitness, and finance. So we have a protector of our community. That's a father and a husband. I think it's an awesome person to have. We can learn from and get some life experiences and stuff like that. So first off, I'll start off. What made you want to choose the law enforcement field? Like, what got you into that service that wanted you to do that? And even the military, right? Those things kind of maybe go hand in hand a little bit too.
Yeah. So I guess as far as the military, because that came first, that came right out of high school. My grandpa was a World War II veteran in the Philippines. My other grandpa was actually in the Berlin conflict in the Army. Grew up, spending a lot of time with them. And then my stepdad was 30 years Air Force. He actually retired Chief Master Sergeant. So when it came time to, I was going through high school and I wasn't the biggest fan of school. I was decent at it, but I didn't really like it.
I was not either.
Yeah. So I had a lot better things to do, just staring out the window, thinking of things I could get into later. But, so it came down to my parents were like, hey, you're going to college, whether you like it or not. So, and we're not paying for it. So you can do good enough in school to get a scholarship, be really good at a sport, try to get an athletic scholarship or join the military. And I was in junior ROTC in high school. So that military mindset was kind of set in there, and then graduated at 17, turned 18 in basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base, and spent 7 years in the Air Force. Just got out three years ago now. So it was good. It was a lot of fun. It taught me a lot about leadership, which I think trying to kind of go fast forward into law enforcement. I'm a patrol sergeant now. I think that leadership that I learned, in the Air Force and how to work together with a large number of guys helps out when you're a leader over a smaller shift or a smaller subgroup of guys.
Right.
But mostly family. Is the reason that I went into the military. Nobody in my family was in policing, but I went to college, started out in aviation engineering, realized I didn't like math that much, and then started looking into criminology at OSU and just started getting my degree in criminology. I was like, well, I'm gonna give a hand at law enforcement. So that's kind of how I ended up in it.
Do you think if your parents didn't approach you the way they approached you, you would have gone into one of the branches anyways, or do you think that was the final push that?
I most likely would have, just because the main thing that determined, the Air Force was the fact that my stepdad was in the Air Force for 30 years. So I knew how that operated. I knew, or at least from stories and his experience, and I mean, in 30 years, he went all over the world. I can't even count how many countries. And I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to travel. I was young, could go, see the world on Uncle Sam's dime pretty much, and get to do a lot of awesome things while we were out there doing it. And
so what was your favorite place you got to travel while you were in the Air Force?
I did a lot of stuff stateside, but my favorite place was Romania, actually. We, due to, an election and all that stuff and government shutdowns, our squadron kept getting pushed back for like deployments to whether it be Kuwait or Afghanistan. So we did a lot of like humanitarian stuff.
Yeah.
So in Romania, we built a hospital in a little town called Kupia Terzi, which is not too far out of like Cluj-Napoca area, which is a pretty big city in Romania, north of the Transylvanian mountains. But I only spent, I think it was 4 weeks there, because we did like overlapping, not shifts, but a group of 40 guys would go start working, and then by the time that their 40 days starts to come up, a new group of 40 guys would start to come in, and then it would just kind of keep the whole thing going, so you don't got one same group of guys working 12 16-hour days for however long the project may have taken.
Yeah. And so I know you touched on a little bit about, you started going through the criminology stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So after not after you graduated, after you finished the military, was there something that specifically led you to want to get into the law enforcement field or something like that, or your choice to do that?
I just always respected, cops and stuff when I was growing up. That was kind of instilled in me when I was younger. Watched, a lot of cops growing up, actually, when you had actual cable TV and everybody wasn't streaming everything. Every once and again, cops would come on in the evening and you watch. And I was like, man, it's exciting. That's cool. You get to go out and do all this new stuff. Things are ever changing. And I get bored really easy. So yeah. I can't do or at least I don't. I guess I've never tried. I couldn't do the 9 to 5, clock in, sit at your cubicle.
Same thing, day in, day out.
Absolutely, yeah. I couldn't do it. That's why my wife and I have talked. A couple years ago when things really started to turn as far as like law enforcement and how people, at least how the media portrayed people thought of law enforcement. I was like, man, do I want to do this for another, at that time, 27 years left, in my career, because it's 30 and out.
Right.
And I was like, but I don't know what else I would do. I talked to her. I was like, the only thing that I think that off the top of my head I'd be happy doing is like a pilot or something, and that's expensive. That's expensive schooling, after I already have a bachelor's degree. So,
well, we actually had a pilot on the podcast. We talked a little bit about that. But
okay.
But yeah, that was kind of the next thing we're going to get into, was talking about, obviously it seems like you have a lot of patriotism for our country and even the community and stuff like that. So where do you feel like that comes from, or what, what motivates you, or you have those feelings or whatever? And we're going to get into talking about is a little bit of the,
why did the country as a whole kind of start to lose
anti-American Semitic, am I saying this
sentiment?
Sentiment, yeah. Sentiment. But and anti-police and all that stuff. I mean, when all that stuff happened, I remember like to me, it's just like, it seems like logical, right? If a police officer is telling you to like stop doing something,
mm-hmm.
like you stop doing the thing they're telling you to do, and it leads into a whole bunch, right? Just like what you said, having that respect for the authority. I'm not saying like you guys are humans too. You may make mistakes, may not be perfect, but they're ultimately the cops. You have respect for them and you listen to them, and then you get it figured out later. You don't just decide that you're just going to wrestle a cop because they're maybe making to you a bad judgment on something at that very second.
Right. I agree 100% as far as, and we can go into the details of like kind of my thought on when people, fight with law enforcement and stuff, and it's gonna 99.99% of the time, it's going to end the way that the with the officer winning overall. You know what I mean?
Well, right, yeah.
So how about if there's an issue, you have an issue with it, with why you're being pulled over. If you have an issue with why an officer came up and made contact with you, and instead of, like a consensual, hey man, you mind if I see your license? I just want to know who you are. Versus, hey, I'm so and so from this department. I need to see your identification. Like they're compelling. They have a reason they're trying to identify you, right? And if you disagree with that or feel like it's unlawful, hash that out later. Like if it goes to court or a suppression hearing or goes to jury trial, anything like that, that stuff can all be handled. You don't need to be fighting on the sidewalk or in the ditch somewhere with a law enforcement officer because you
don't want to show your ID to them or something like simple like that. Yeah.
And a lot of it too is substance abuse and alcohol and stuff like that. That's, I would say, a majority of the. I'm trying to think if I've ever fought a sober person other than in the jail. When I started out in the jail, I had a couple uses of force there, but 9 times out of 10 that was in the Sallyport area where people were coming off the streets. They were high or they were drunk, something like that.
What'd you call that? Sallyport?
Yeah. It's just a term for, like, we've got a garage. So opens up, the cruiser pulls in, the door shuts, and there's these little boxes, like bulletproof boxes, that you take everything that's lethal or less lethal off of your duty belt, and then you'll put that in the box and secure it before the jail comes out and or gives you the okay to remove your prisoner from your vehicle. So gotcha. It's just called a Sallyport. I don't know why.
Sallyport.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like your family situation, your grandparents and you were raised in a patriotic environment.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think, I feel like that's gotten more and more rare.
Yeah. And to be honest, I don't know why. I think that there's as far as national government, I think that I've seen an overall distrust and in the government. I remember being young, and maybe it was because I was young. Maybe when I was young, if I would have asked a Vietnam veteran how he felt about our government, or if he trusted our government, who knows what his answer would have been.
I know Vietnam veterans who won't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Good or bad.
Yeah.
Just, not to ask them,
And I don't know. I don't know what why the patriotism's kind of gone down.
I think a lot of people would say, you brought up mistrust of the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
You can love your country and not trust your federal government.
Yeah. And I agree with that.
But there's a lot of almost hatred for America these days. Everything we do is evil and,
Right. And I wish I had an answer for where I even thought that came from, because it seems like a lot of the people that, they're demonstrating their hatred for, whether it's, the American way or the lifestyle, or, but they're exercising their freedom, their First Amendment, to do, their freedom of speech that is given to them by, it's their inherent right, as a member, as a citizen of the United States, and they're using that, and yet talking about how terrible the country is. Where I've been to countries that if the majority of our population could see, it's just depravity, and it's terrible. And I would say poor here is almost middle class in some of the places I've seen.
Absolutely. Well, none of these people that hate the country get up and leave.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some truth to that too. So,
and on a day, you can see things on the national news and take a big look at the way things are for cops, but when it comes down, like, do you see a lot of that in Knox County on a day-to-day basis? People who don't like you, don't trust you, think you're...
I don't think we have it bad at all here locally. Our citizens, the majority are great. I mean, I get thanked for my service all the time. I mean, I think that comes with living in a smaller county, a rural county, that still, for the most part, instills those, those values into their children and practice those as adults. But man, I would say the majority of folks here in Knox County are awesome. They support us. I mean, they support not just law enforcement, but first responders, the fire department, the nurses. And that's huge. It really does mean, a lot to the guys, and girls and the first responders when people reach out, especially, if there's a critical incident or something like that, something that, the public knows that was either, rough on the guys, or like, man, that would just be terrible to have to witness. I mean, there's an overpouring, like, outreach of, hey, I'll get texts from, and granted, they're texts from people I know, so most likely they're friends or acquaintances, but they're reaching out, checking, hey, hey man, how's everything going? How you feeling? How you holding up? And I don't think we see it as bad, of course, as some of these major cities, and especially the ones that you've seen on the news. Your Minneapolis, your Chicago, Detroit, stuff like that.
We even do jiu-jitsu with somebody who works in Columbus, and if he was sitting here, he'd tell a different story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a subcultural thing. I think that, maybe, and this is just a guess in my opinion, I think there's different values, and you see it as, in the city, you see a set of values, and then it slowly changes to the set of values that the majority of us practice out here, in a more rural area. And
that's interesting how it changes from like when you go into the city and, different parts of just even the state. I mean, how much difference it is.
I'm even from I'm from Cleveland, and I still go up to see family, and it's kind of stretched out to the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see people with signs in their front yard that, convey an anti-American, anti-police kind of, and like anything else, I mean, it trickles out, right?
Yeah.
I think right now Mount Vernon, Knox County can stay the way it is, but it will definitely trickle down more and more as time goes on.
Absolutely. And I think even, along with that, kind of trickling down, I think that as time goes on, I don't think people are going to be, instilling those values in their children. Some may, I'm sure a lot still will. But
I've talked to Matt about the family unit what was what the America is lacking right now. There's the lack of a family unit.
There was a time, and I used to say this in our meetings, when God, family, and country was like what meant the world to everyone. That was your life.
Mm-hmm.
And those were all collections. You're a Christian, you went to a church, your family's a collection of people, this country's a collection.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, everything's become very individualized. My job, my this, my that. And you put that on top of like the whole social warrior thing. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, all these people that have things to say about you guys, they don't do your job. They don't know what it's like. I bet they don't have the courage to do your job, but they can sit there and criticize it and point the finger. And
kind of like a Monday morning quarterback is a term that gets used a lot, by first responders and stuff. Is it, something that happens in a split second, and then you get on the news or you pull it up on YouTube and you watch the slow motion version where they zoom in on the individual's hands to show that their hands are clear, but it's dark and they're running or fighting or whatever. It's like, just Monday morning quarterback. It's real easy to break down a situation, after the situation's over, and you've got
especially
all
if
the
the
time in
media
the
only
world.
shows you the part that they want the public to see.
Right. Yeah.
Especially, I couldn't even imagine, like my dad, we've kind of talked about this, but yeah, just like you said, I think that's a good example how someone breaks it down, something like that. But let's take it and say, okay, these people that are criticizing the cops or whatever, so why don't you be a cop for a night and go pulling someone over at like midnight?
Mm-hmm.
You can't see what they're doing in the car. I mean, and you know what I'm saying? You're rolling up on someone that's it's pitch black outside. You don't know. Maybe you run the plates. This person had some sort of prior whatever, and it's like there's all these things that yeah. I mean, it's going to be a very very that thing that whatever, it could be very very stressful, and it's not going to be easy to make a decision that you have to go like this and decide how you're going to handle something if something goes very bad or they get argumentative or stuff like that. I mean, I couldn't even imagine obviously the stress and the intensity, the tenseness that comes on when you're dealing with something like that.
Yeah, and just real quick about the them not they should try it for a day, or they should there's individuals that have kind of been on the other side, and there's videos, whether I've seen them on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, where they've went and pretty much played the cop in these scenarios using like simunition rounds and stuff. And all right, here's a drunk guy walking out of a bar who's being belligerent, and you need to take care of this situation. And watching these citizens or civilians, non-police, seeing how they handle a situation, and it's they'll break it down afterwards. Like, I didn't know what he was going to do. I was nervous. And a lot of times they may shoot and kill the individual over something that would have either been de-escalated by somebody with some experience in law enforcement, or handled differently,
Right.
to where an officer involved shooting wouldn't have been the outcome of that.
Right.
But
what do you want the public to know that about like your guys' profession or something that or your coworkers, whatever, that the
They
public,
don't know.
the public may doesn't know? Like, what's something obviously I'm saying that they want them to know about your profession?
I guess the public, I would just say generally, because I feel like kind of we talked about, I feel like we have a good community here that I think understands a lot, or even if they don't understand, they might try to understand. I would want people to know that we don't do it for the money, because there's plenty of extremely intelligent guys and girls that I work with that are resourceful, and they could go and make a lot of money doing something else. But they care about their community. They truly care. We're not a bunch of robots that just go out and do what big government tells us to do. Go
Right.
and no,
Well, you're not even people that just love the power that you hold in your hands or on that badge or whatever.
Right. And I'm not saying that those people don't exist, because there's you've got a bad apple in every bunch, I believe. But the guys I work with, they care. And that they truly want their community to be better. A vast majority of the guys, live in the community that they police. So they want it to be safer for their kids growing up. A lot of the guys I work with are my age, so they've all got, young kids like I do. And they want the community to be safer for their kids when they grow up. And that's why they do it. They do it because they love their community, they love their family, and they care, not for some power trip or like I said, for the money, because it's not there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wish it was, but it's not.
Yeah. So does fitness kind of play a part in prepping for your job or using it in your job?
Absolutely. And I got to give a shout out to my wife, Sam. She's awesome, and she's actually I would say the main reason that I got a membership here, and I've been doing jiu-jitsu and stuff for I don't know 7 months now, I think, is because fitness is important. I've still got goals that I still want to hit. And those goals are ever changing, but she pushed me into working on my fitness because it's easy, depending on your mindset, to kind of get complacent. I had, we would fight people in the jail, more so I would say than we do out in patrol.
Right.
But once I got over into patrol, and I haven't had a use of force in forever, and I was working midnights. The sleep schedule and trying to work out, and I just didn't have the motivation to do any of that stuff. And I was like, well, I haven't had a use of force in like 3 months, so I really didn't see the importance of working out. You know what I mean? I'd rather get my sleep and be fresh that way than to go work on my physical health and or my fitness. And my wife, she pretty much sat me down one day and she's like, you need to start going to the gym. She's like, I don't care if you go lift weights, if you go swim, run. She actually brought up jujitsu here. She's like, just go take a class and see if you like it. And if you like it, stick with it. Because she's like, I don't want to get a call at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or she wouldn't get a phone call. Somebody would knock on our door that I made a traffic stop out and, in the rural side of the county and got in a use of force with somebody and I didn't win, So she pushed me to that. She's like, I know you love me. I know you love your son. You want to be around to see him grow up. We want you to be around. You have to work on your physical fitness and you have to work on your training. And that's why I started. And I did, I don't know, 3 or 4 classes, and I came and talked to you guys about buying a gi, and kind of because I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And you guys are good at holding folks accountable, because I know I've missed a few classes in a row, and then I'll get a text from Matt like, dude, where are you? I was like, I know I need to go in, and then I'll be back. So
well, I mean, I'm sure you've had a situation where even like a 10-second physical altercation, I mean, that takes a lot out of you.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you're going, all out. It's so taxing. And it's another thing that's important is when you're in those situations to kind of familiarize yourself with being in those stressful situations. So even though, like, when we train out on the mats and we're rolling, and it's not a life or death situation, but say I'm rolling with somebody like, Kyle, big dude, lot stronger than me. It's trying to, maintain my breathing,
You're thinking.
Yeah. Be thinking about it. And the big thing that, a lot of people don't realize in law enforcement is after that critical incident or after all that crazy stuff happens, you have to go and write a report about it, and it better be exactly what happened, because you don't get afforded the, things just went crazy and I blacked out or I don't
think
remember.
He touched my gun, but I don't really.
Right, and that's something like you need to have the wherewithal to know. Okay, we're rolling around, in this hypothetical situation, rolling around in the ditch somewhere, or on the sidewalk, and it's like, okay, knowing how to breathe, knowing how to use my weight that I've learned here, and you learn some in the police academy and stuff as well. But you really have to continue to sharpen those skills because you forget, and it's been huge. Just being able to, like Matt said, be able to think about it, because you're going to have to be able to recall that stuff later.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You kind of answered the next question I was going to ask. That was whether or not this job is hard on your family. Obviously, it's it's made your wife think about your future, your health, you being around. Was that kind of a one-time thing, or does it stress her out?
Oh, no. It stresses her out more than I'm sure she lets me know. And she's pretty vocal about it. So she's not the one. One of the many things I love about her so much is she'll tell you what's on her mind. You don't have to guess. And, but no, it is tough. I think, along with, that looming thought of, oh, well, something bad could happen tonight, or, it's just a dangerous job, is just the schedules and stuff. I mean, if you get into policing, depending on your department or how many opportunities they have for special assignments, I mean, you're not going to get day shift weekends off until you're, high in administration. I work 4 to 12. So, I go in at 4 p.m. I get off at midnight. I get home. My family's already in bed. I wake up, I go home, I decompress a little bit, cause I can't just go home, take the uniform off and, take a shower and lay in bed. Like my mind's still thinking about everything else. And that's changed with being a leader too. I've had, a little bit more responsibility, or a supervisor, but missing that time with the family in the evenings, because now it's summer. You're driving around and your crews are patrolling your area, you're responding to calls, and you see these families out when it's nice and 70 degrees and sunny, and they're barbecuing or whatever. You're like, man, I would love to be home with my kid and my wife right now. But that time will come when the schedule's a little bit better. But that's just one of the other sacrifices that a lot of first responders, and same with medics and firefighters. I mean, those guys go and they'll stay on station for, 24 hours or something. And then, then they'll be home for a couple of days. But it's, the families make a huge sacrifice for their community too. And I think that's something that doesn't get mentioned is like, you've got this, you got police week and, all these different weeks or days to kind of give it up to like law enforcement or firefighters, what have you. But then the families, they're trudging right there along too. My wife, she owns a business with multiple locations, and she's, a mother, and she's, and then I'm not home in the evenings. So, and that'll get tougher if I'm still on 4 to 12 as my son gets older, gets into sports and stuff like that, because that all happens in the evening. So I just would hate to miss out on a lot of that, but it's kind of one of the things that kind of comes with the territory,
Yeah.
How old's your son now?
He is 2.5, almost 3. So he'll be 3 in September.
So he doesn't really understand what you do yet.
No. He's awesome. He's a ball of fun. He's getting into, it's amazing how they watch everything you do.
Oh,
and I mean, they pick stuff up so quickly. I've thought about bringing him in here, because a couple of the days, a few days I haven't shown up because my wife was working, and I had him, and he's still too young to like, hey, sit down next to the mat with like a coloring book or something and just hang out for 30, 45 minutes. And he'll see something and he's off doing that. Right. So, and
feel free to bring him in though. Cause Kylie and I will bring our daughter in. She's 2.5 as well. So,
okay.
You can let him run on the mats and stuff like that, or you're more welcome to bring him in.
Okay. Awesome. So, yeah, I'll definitely do that. He, cause my big worry is, cause when you're like lifting weights or something, I feel like it's a bit easier to, keep an eye on a little one, but when you're rolling and stuff and, you're getting all contorted and turned around, and next thing you know, they're somewhere else. You know what I mean?
They're in the front parking lot.
Right.
Do you take your job home with you, or do you try to?
I think with experience, I've gotten better with leaving it. A lot of guys, I've listened to some other experienced guys, law enforcement officers. They kind of mention, when they suit up before their shift, they put their vest on like that's like it's game time now. Like I'm going to go to work. I've got a different mindset. Because I would consider myself a pretty laid back guy. I don't really talk all that much, unless like situations like this,
Right.
But then you go to work and you don't have to be rude or mean to people, but you have to be an authoritative figure. And that comes with, being a little bit louder when you talk, just have an authoritative tone. They call it officer presence, right? Because if you show up on scene and it's a verbal altercation or a bar fight or something, and you show up and you're meek and you're not standing up straight, and you're just like, hey guys, don't do that. Like, that's not going to fly. That's not going to get you anywhere. But I've seen myself and a lot of other guys, you show up and you have that officer presence, kind of helps out with toning the situation down. That helps in itself de-escalate the situation a lot of times. And then, your shift's over, you come home, you take the vest off, and now it's time to be dad. And, you can't talk to your wife like you would talk to, a criminal, get over here, this, that, like, no, that doesn't fly. So, and same with your kids, where you may be less patient with giving commands or giving instructions to somebody on the street. And then you get home and you got a little guy that's just trying to figure something out, and you have to be, patient and calm and, stuff like that. But yeah, there's been critical incidents and stuff that I've taken home for sure. I think with experience, we get better at it. And the biggest thing for me is trying to talk with the young guys that might not have figured out how to handle that situation when they get home and, nobody's at home and it's just them, and they're, kind of at home, and they're in their own head kind of thing. Is just talking with them and making sure that, they're good before a situation, because a situation can eat somebody up pretty quick.
And that's kind of what I meant. Does it help you to come home and be able to talk to your wife about it, or do you keep it inside and maybe you talk to your coworkers about it because you don't want to bring her into that world?
I'll talk to my wife about some things. If she asks, I tell her. I'm not, I won't, oh no, you don't need to know. Like, if she asks, and she asks me all the time how my day goes. And, a lot of times, oh, it was good. Oh, it was busy, or, I had a bad one today. And then she'll ask, and, I'll tell her, a lot of folks in law enforcement, they say it's important to have friends outside of law enforcement too, because I think a lot of cops, because a lot of us are like-minded. So then our friends are our coworkers, and then the only people we hang out with, on our weekends end up being our coworkers or friend from another department. So then it's nice to be able to bounce stuff off of, or have normal, civilian or citizen conversations. My wife calls it cop talk. Yeah. Like, I'll meet up with a buddy I haven't seen forever, and it'll be, hey man, how's it going? How you doing? We'll be having dinner, and 5-10 minutes into the conversation, so what's new at work? You guys have anything exciting happen? And then, for the next hour or two, it's cop talk, and my wife's like, oh my gosh, let's talk about something else. And it's just hard, because that's what we know, and that's what we do, and it's so much of our personality. It's hard not to bring that up when you're with another like-minded person. But yeah.
Well, I mean, you can imagine where that comes from. Most of us, anything can happen at any time, but most of us go to work every day knowing we're going to go home.
Yeah.
And you guys do something where that might cross your mind. You get into situations where that could be it. You know what I mean? That's something that I think a lot of people don't think about. It's not your average job. It is a job. It's also kind of who you are. Yeah.
And I think that's why it becomes so much of who we are. Because in order for you to be successful, or at least safe at it, you have to think about it all the time. And that, that mindset that you have, where you're like, you sit down in a restaurant and, like, my back is never to the door. My wife knows it. If there's two entrances, it's the main entrance is the one that I want to sit facing. And I think I actually learned that as a kid, but it just fortified that when I was, started being in law enforcement. And my wife knows. We'll go into a restaurant and she sits down first, but she lets me sit in the booth or the chair that faces the door, just because it bothers me not to be able to see it. And because it's so important to think about, watching people and seeing how people are reacting to you or reacting to other people when you're at work. When you come home, it's the same thing, So,
getting here to a couple last questions here. So, how important is your faith to dealing with the situations at work and stuff like that?
It's huge. And another thing that I, I'll give praise to my wife for is, she has, because before me and her met and started dating, I mean, I rarely went to church, didn't really think about my faith all that much. She grew up Christian household, going to church. We got married. We were going to church, just me and her, and then we got time to have having our son, and he was born, and she's like, she told me it was important to her that he grew up in a Christian household that knew God, and that prayed together as a family. That's something that we do with my son every time before he lays down for his nap, before he goes to bed. It's just something that we practice because you never know. I mean, that's something else that kind of comes with the territory as far as working in law enforcement is you see some things that are absolutely terrifying or just horrible. And I couldn't imagine, you see children get hurt or pass away. And then it's hard not to immediately think, oh, well, that could happen to my son, that drunk driver that hit that woman. And, what if my wife is just trying to take, my son down to the zoo and gets hit by a drunk driver, so you never know when your time is up. You know what I mean? So it's always been important to us to practice our faith and be open about it, at least, with each other and our family, and go to church. And, that crosses my mind when I'm at work and stuff too. Just, it depends on the situation if my mind will even let me think about that.
Right. Yeah.
So, because I think the more high stress incidences that you would think you'd be thinking about that more, like, oh man, this could be a bad one. My mind's thinking, I'm en route. Like, where are my other guys coming from? Is there any other local agencies that can help out? What am I going to do when I get there? Is there anybody? So there's so many other thoughts that kind of self-preservation, I think, gets pushed out of your initial like conscious thinking and just goes into like survival mode. So if, like, it comes down to it, my brain is going to do what it can to make sure that I survive. And so faith really doesn't come into it as a conscious thought at that time.
Right, but it's always there because you've built.
Absolutely.
You have a foundation to.
Absolutely, and the thing that, like, I was talking to my wife the other day about it, was that my fear isn't, I'm not going to say I'm not afraid of, getting critically hurt or dying or something like that, because that's not true. But I don't have a fear of the unknown, because I truly believe that I know where I'm going if something terrible were to happen.
Yeah.
My biggest fear is, well, now Sam's a widow and my son doesn't have a dad.
Yeah.
That's what comes to my mind. Like, oh man, if something goes sideways, what's my wife going to do? How's my little boy going to grow up without me? And those thoughts kind of come in occasionally when you're en route to maybe a less serious call, but you just get that I don't know, unconscious thought, that inner self, like, hey man, this seems sketchy. Like there's I don't know what it is, but there's something up with this situation. And then it just kind of heightens everything. And that's probably when I think about it the most, is when you have that 25-minute drive there to think about something. This isn't the way this call normally comes out. Like there's, because even though every call is different, you can kind of put them in like, little groups. Like, you could go to 1,000 domestics, and they're not domestic violence situations, and they're not all going to be the same, but they're relatively similar, right? You've got your, more verbal threatening domestics, and then you've got your physical ones that there's injuries. But then every so often you get these outliers that are like, I can't put my finger on it yet, but there's something weird about this one before you even get there. And it's just kind of listening to that little voice that I think a lot of people should, think about as well, is because it's telling you something for a reason, So,
Last question we have for you here. What is the funniest story that you can share with us from your job?
Well, I don't know. I hope they're not those type of stories that you kind of had to be there for. But I've got a couple if you've got time for them.
Yeah.
So when I first started, I was recently cut off of field training, so I was on my own. Still trying to get my legs under me and figure out. Anyways, we're going to a fight or an assault. It came out. And so we're driving there, we're going, lights and sirens, emergency status out to this residence. And we get there and there's probably 20 people that are like 19 to 24.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is absolutely drunk, like hammered. And, we're like, all right, we were told that there was an assault here. We're trying to figure everything out. And of course, when people are drunk, it seems like they're either they either want to fight you or they want to be the most helpful. Like I had like 5 people come to me. Well, this happened and this happened. And they're all yelling over each other, trying to tell me what's going on. I'm like, all right, like I just need to talk to the person that's hurt. So I go talk to her. Ends up somebody else called in that didn't see the situation. She fell down and hit her head, and that's why she was bleeding.
Oh,
but the reason that the story is kind of funny, and I've remembered it for 6 years now, is because I don't know if it was everybody got nervous because the cops showed up, but all like 20, 25 of these kids, like there was maybe 15 of them that now were on all fours in different parts of the yard, throwing up, just heaving. I don't know if it was they got the butterflies because the cops showed up, and it sounded like bullfrogs on a pond. Like you're just sitting there, and I'm trying to have a conversation with this other deputy. Like, what are we going to do? Get the fire or get EMS in here, and it's just like, and then over here, and I don't think I'll ever forget that story. My wife says, you should really like get a book, like just get a notepad. And when you have like funny stories or, things that you want to try to remember or whatever, write that stuff down. Because I mean, I work with guys that have been a cop for 25, 30 years now. I'm sure they've forgotten, more funny stories or crazy instances than I've even had in my career.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, that was probably my favorite story.
That's good.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you for coming in today, Jesse. We appreciate it, and thank you for your service to the community.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that part you were talking about at the end when you thought about your wife being a widow, your son growing up without a dad. The fact that you could go out and do anything you want to do with your life, and you're still doing this—that's what makes you guys like who you are.
Well, thank you. Right? Yeah, I appreciate it. I really do. And again, it's huge to the guys when the community and guys like yourself show support to them, because it can be a trudge, especially when you've got guys that have had I don't know why, but it seems like it kind of comes in waves of like critical incidents. Or had one guy that new, young, rookie, I would consider him. And it just got to the point where it was like every call he was going to was, a DOA, a dead on arrival, some natural causes, some not. And it's like and this was over like a 2-week period. I think he had 6, and you would try to help him out. Like he would get a call in his area and say, I don't know, let's just say it was like a theft call, something that you can go investigate, do your report on. Like, hey man, don't worry, I'll handle that. You just take time to try to get some of your paperwork done, whatever, and you'll take that theft. And then 30 minutes later, while you're investigating that theft, a domestic comes out in his area or another DOA comes out in his area. And it can be a trudge. So when, when the community shows their support, or, says, hey, it really means a lot what you guys do. That is huge.
Yeah, one thing I started doing, like about a year ago, is like whenever I actually see a cop in uniform in a restaurant, it's like Chipotle or whatever, I always try to buy their lunch for them. Like I'll jump to the line and buy the lunch or what if they're having a meal or something.
Yeah, that
Kelly and I started doing.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it kind of goes.
I feel like it's the least I could do for I could do for somebody.
It's absolutely appreciated, and we have people in our community just like you that do the same thing, and that's definitely helpful, and of course. Police aren't supposed to take like free coffee or free food or anything like that, but I'm not going to have an argument with you over like, no, please, don't. I can pay for my own food. And you're like, no, I insist. I'm not going to get into a verbal argument with you over, some Chipotle. So yeah, it's definitely appreciated.
All right. Well, thank you, Jesse. And if you believe it, you can achieve it. And we'll hope to see you in the gym soon.